Welcome to Scrolling to Death. Today I have the founder of Heads Up Alliance, Dani Elachi, who is joining us from Down Under. Hi, Dani.
Hi, Nikki.
How are you?
Yeah, I'm well.
I wanted to chat with you because of the big news in Australia that we've all been talking about here in America, and that is the Age Gate Bill to get all kids under 16 truly off of social media. And you were involved in this, so tell me how the hell you pulled it off.
Well, we don't quite know how we pulled it off, actually.
Okay.
It did really come out of nowhere because, our organization has been in this space for the last 4 years or so. We've just been encouraging families to delay smartphones and social media, very much like your wait until 8 movement in the States. And never in our wildest dreams did we think we'd actually be able to get our lawmakers across the line on this.
Yeah.
But I think Jonathan Haidt's book earlier this year was a real seminal moment in this movement and brought the whole conversation to the fore, obviously not only in America, but in very many parts of the world, including Australia. And the conversation, that's how everything starts, with a small conversation, and then the whispers turn into a shout. And in this country, obviously his book has made an impact, and a couple of lawmakers at the state level got interested, and then next thing you know, a couple of major media companies got behind the whole idea, and then suddenly at the federal level we had our opposition leader speaking about it. He's the alternative prime minister, and he made a promise that if he was elected in 2025, that he would increase the minimum age of social media to 16 within 100 days of government. Of course, that put a lot of pressure on our prime minister.
Yeah.
And he ultimately responded in the way that he has. So we're thrilled. We're thrilled, absolutely thrilled to be, I guess, leading the world in some respects on this front. Yeah.
Okay, amazing. I want to dig more into that law, but if you take us back to, if you can tell listeners, like you started Heads Up Alliance in 2020. Obviously, there was a lot going on that year. But what's your story? Why did you decide to start this advocacy group?
I've fallen into this space completely by accident, by mere virtue of being a father. I have 5 children. My eldest, who's now 15, was about 10 or 11 at the time. And, that's the age, it seems, that kids come home and say to their parents, hey, can I have a smartphone? I'm the only one in the whole class or in the whole grade, or in their minds, in the whole world.
Yeah.
The phone, can I please have one? Please, please, please. And her mum and I were like, I'm not really sure if we want to do that. But we relented. Everyone's got a spare phone lying around somewhere. So with a heavy heart, we passed on that phone. And, as you know, Nikki, it doesn't take very long for the kids to get obsessed with that little pocket-sized poker machine in the pocket. And then, we saw her withdrawing, no longer doing the things with the family that she ordinarily would, no longer reading, no longer cooking with mom, no longer playing with her siblings. And then I think the straw that broke the camel's back was finding her under the covers at, midnight, messaging friends. And my wife and I thought to ourselves, oh gosh, we knew this was going to happen, didn't we? And then when the phone malfunctioned, luckily it didn't last very long, and the phone malfunctioned. And then she said, look, I'm going to need a new phone now. And we took the opportunity to have a chat and say, unfortunately, darling, we love you too much to let your childhood slip away like this. There's too much happening, too many good things that you're missing out on. And so we took the opportunity, as I said, to have that very difficult conversation. It sent her into a spiral of tears, of course, many nights of anguish. And my wife and I would be laying in bed thinking, how are we going to get through this? And my wife would occasionally look to me and say, look, should we just get her this new phone? I can't bear to see her like this anymore.
Oh my gosh.
But we stuck strong, and we said, no, we're going to get through these tears and save a whole lot of tears later. And that would be my message to a lot of parents. It is very difficult in the short term sometimes to take that stand, but I think in the long term, it's in your child's best interests. But, the next best thing we could do, Nikki, was to reach out to other families in our school community and ask them were they going through the same things? And lo and behold, they are.
Right.
And would they like to join hands with ours and like hold out together? Because doing it alone is really, really tough. And a few said yes. So we went from being alone to having a small community of parents in our school who were happy to do what we were doing, and we were able to lean on them and they were able to lean on us. So that's how it started. And then over time, we spread the word, and there are like lots of little alliances now all over the country doing what we're doing. It doesn't cost any money. It's real simple. It's a conversation that needs to happen amongst parents. And along the way, we fell into some advocacy, getting phones out of schools.
Yeah.
So we were very heavily involved in that in Australia as well in the last few years. And we were very successful in that regard. And I see that in America, a lot of schools are also coming on board. And my message to anyone who's thinking, oh, is this going to work? It absolutely is going to work. And it changes the school environment almost overnight. And don't listen to the detractors and the naysayers who are thinking, oh, what if our children, the world will end if we take the phones out of their hands during the school day. No, it won't. They will rediscover friendship. They will rediscover learning. And all the academics here in Australia who told us that the sun will never rise again were proven completely wrong. And funnily enough, they're the same people telling us now that with this new law, our children are going to be completely left behind. And oh my goodness, what's going to happen to them if they don't have TikTok at the age of 14? It's a travesty. It's against their human rights, of course, Nikki. But we've said to them, look, you got it wrong on the phones in schools issue.
Yep.
Thank goodness we didn't listen to you then, and we're not going to listen to you again now. We're just going to push ahead and do the right thing by our children.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Thank you for sharing that personal story. And I'm so grateful that you caught it early with your oldest daughter's use, because that addiction is real, that the harmful content is real, the FOMO, all the anxiety, all the things that come with having that device. And I'm you just a few years behind with my oldest daughter being 9. And I mean, I started this just out of the fear of like, what the heck do I do when they start asking? And luckily now doing what I do, my 9-year-old's like not interested at all, because she knows about the bad things that come along with it. And how it's really hard just to use it as a tool, because there's so many addictive toy aspects of that device, and that they don't need it. We're giving them their childhood and letting them have that extended childhood by holding it back. And it does take, though, at least one other kid. This is what I keep hearing, is you have to find at least one other family that's willing to delay with you. And that's something you've really identified as a indicator of success for that, right?
Yeah, we say it's not only about delaying, it's delaying in community. If you want to do this long term and make it a real success, you have to create a community. And so we not only delay smartphones, but we also come together every few months. We'll come together and go for a walk in the local bushland, or we'll go watch a game of footy together. We'll do something as a community to show the children that it's not a movement that says no. It's a movement that says no to smartphones and social media. But in order to say yes to so many more things, our yes is much bigger than the no. And the yes is yes to nature, yes to community, yes to sport, yes to play, yes to real life relationship, yes to all the wonderful things that childhood should be about, and that big tech has stolen for the last generation of children, unfortunately.
Yeah.
We really want to reinforce the yes.
Yeah. And just the opportunity to be bored and have nothing to do, right? They are in absence of that if they have a device on them.
There is much to be said for having nothing to do. That's when all the good ideas come into your mind. That's when you can reconcile your past with your present and all these wonderful things that is part of, I mean, it's important for adults, but also for children, just to be bored for a few minutes every day. There's no such thing as boredom anymore for our children.
I know. And that's
without
where creativity...
boredom, you don't have excitement.
Yeah.
It'll be ups and downs.
I know. I was moderating a panel the other day here in Los Angeles, and one person had a question. She's like, well, they're closed, but they closed down all the after school programs and all the community programs. So the kids have nothing to do. What are they going to do if they don't have options outside of the home? They need the devices. And I'm like, what happened to being bored? Meaning just run around outside and play with a stick in the dirt, or literally just figuring something out on their own. Like, we are over parenting with thinking we have to coordinate activities all hours of the day.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree with you, Nikki. Childhood isn't about going from one activity to another. It is simply sometimes just go outside, meet the neighbors. There are kids next door that you perhaps haven't met yet, or across the street, or down the road. Build community. Jump on your bike and go and ask Joe next door if he'd like to come for a bike ride with you. There are so many opportunities that don't have to be structured, and even just being in the home and helping mum with dinner. How about that?
Yeah, I know. Anything. Figure it out.
There's a million things to do. I mean, I've made a list of children. Every time they come to me, they say, I'm bored. I say, well, here's a 4-page list of things you could do. Choose one. Mm-hmm. And they've got more opportunities than we ever had.
Yeah, or you give me a list. You make a list of things you could do, right? Okay, 2 questions. What is bushland like?
In Australia?
Yeah. Like when you say you went for a walk in the bushland, what does that mean?
So we've got pockets, in my particular part of Sydney where I live. We're not very far away from a walking track where there's plenty of trees and plenty of
like nature. A trail.
Yeah, like a trail. Yeah, okay. Yeah. But there are other parts of Australia, of course, that are far more. This is Sydney, but we're living in an urbanized environment here. We still have pockets of bushland. Okay. But there are obviously parts of Australia that are very much not touched by human development, and there's lots of opportunities wherever you are in the world. I'm sure if you just poke your head out for a few minutes in either direction, you can always find somewhere to go for a nice walk.
Yeah, agree. Okay, and footy is football.
Correct. Footy is football.
You mean football, soccer?
For me in Sydney means rugby league.
Rugby.
Not soccer. We should call it, I mean, football, I understand globally means soccer. I still call it soccer, although some of my friends who are soccer fanatics get very upset if I call it soccer.
Oh.
Apparently it should be called football, but then I've got nothing to call rugby league.
Footy.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you for clarifying. Yeah.
No problem.
Okay, so back to the law that was passed in Australia. So I was wondering, did you guys have a lot of lobbying against it? Because here in America, that's like the number one issue with trying to get anything passed is how much money and time big tech spends lobbying against these bills.
Oh, boy, did we have lobbying against it.
Oh, tell me about that.
The line was long and never ending. We had academics lobbying against it, trying to convince government that there are so many benefits to social media, perhaps of course, there are some benefits to anything, but it's all a question of balance, right?
Yeah, sure.
And if you balance, there might be a few little benefits here on this side and then a lot of negatives on this side, and then you have to make a decision. But the way they painted it was the positives would be so far greater than the negatives, and how could we possibly take this huge wonderful thing for our children away from them? It would be an absolute tragedy to do so.
Yeah.
So we had the academics lining up. We had a lot of cyber safety educators, which is very disappointing, because these are the people who come into our schools to try to show our children how to use social media and the online world more safely. And we would have thought that they would be on side, because they've seen very clearly all the damage that social media has done to our children.
Yeah, and how hard it is for them to use it safely. It's very hard.
It's very hard.
It's not impossible.
It is almost impossible. Let's be honest here, Nikki. We've been fed a narrative for the last 10, 15 years that if only you downloaded this monitoring app on its own, and if only you did this, if only you did that, and if only you did these little things, your children can be safe. And it's big tech's playbook to put the onus back on parents, make us feel like we're failing as parents. Why didn't you use this particular feature on this particular app and to keep your children safe? And so we've been fed this narrative all along, and it's been pushed also by many cyber safety educators, which is very disappointing in my view.
Yeah.
And then the final group that was very much also against the new law was mental health organizations. Again,
why?
very, very surprisingly, you would think that they are on the front lines of all this, seeing the damage and devastation that's happening in families, and that they would be fully behind it. But of course they haven't been. And many of them have relationships with big tech.
Okay.
I mean, there's one major organization that got $1 million from Meta only a few years ago to run some program. Many of them are sitting on the boards of Snapchat and Instagram and TikTok. And the relationships are so intertwined. And it's very hard for parents to get some independent views on this. And our lawmakers were very much bamboozled by, I don't know if bamboozled is a word in America, but
yes, it is. Yeah.
Right. It is. Good.
I'll ask you if there's anything.
Okay, you let me know if there's something you need.
Okay.
So yeah, our lawmakers were really bombarded with all these messages from groups who you would expect would be on the side of parents and families.
Yeah.
And so for a while there, we were thinking, oh my goodness, are they going to just say this is all too hard? All these experts are telling us we shouldn't do this. But thankfully, at the end of the day, our lawmakers, I think, saw through the essential truth, and that is that social media is making our children and our families sick. It's making our societies very, very ill, and that something needs to happen. And so we're glad that we finally were able to do that, and hopefully that gives some hope to other jurisdictions that, yes, you are going to get a lot of pushback, but just keep pushing through and keep telling this. Parents need to stand up and tell their stories, because no academic can tell me or can ask me to deny what I'm seeing with my own eyes and with my own ears and what's happening in my own home. Right. They will try. They will try to tell you, oh, don't believe your eyes and ears. Social media is actually good for your children. And I'm like, but hang on. And then they'll say to you, oh, well, there's no link between social media and mental ill health. Oh, but we have suicide notes from our children telling us that social media pushed them over the edge. So I don't know if I can believe you, because I'd rather believe these poor children and their families, right? So, I mean, their arguments are very flimsy. They just need a little bit of pushback. And I need parents to be empowered to do that, because otherwise we'll just lose another generation of children. You know, as we always say, just like with big tobacco, we might lose another generation before we wake up, but I don't think we can afford to do that anymore.
I don't think so. And I think parents are waking up. And you know, you talked about the parental controls, and that is like the go-to for these companies. We're going to put more onus on you. Here's more tools to keep your child safe or have them keep themselves safe. But when I interview families who've lost a child to something that happened on social media or AI chatbots even, they had the guardrails up. They had, you know, the 12 plus age rating in the App Store. Like, they had the monitoring on. They actually also had conversations with them about these things, and the harm still happened. So it doesn't matter, all of that. It's unsafe for kids. I wonder about the 16 age choice. Do you know why it was 16? Because there also could have been the option of 13, actually just like putting the age gate on, but leaving the age the same as what it is now, but actually like verifying ages. So why 16?
I think that's a great question, Nikki. And whenever I get asked about this, I always say, well, let's take it back to the first principles. Why is it 13 at the moment? And we know it's only 13 at the moment, not because we consulted neuroscientists or child psychologists, and they said to us, yes, under the age of 13, you should protect your children, but from this age onwards, they'll be fine. It's 13 because in your country 25 years ago, it was decided that we shouldn't collect data from children under the age of 13, but it's okay to collect it from children over the age of 13. That's all. And that's why we're at 13. And everyone seems to have forgotten that. And so all along, so throughout this whole year, we've been saying to lawmakers, okay, put 13 out of your mind. If we were redesigning the social media landscape now, what question would we be asking? Would we be asking at what age should we collect our children's data? That might be one of the questions, but it wouldn't be the foremost question. The foremost question should be, what is healthy and safe for our children?
Yeah.
Why don't we ask that question? And when we ask that question, the answer we land on is actually 18. Because everybody agrees that the brain is still developing and that this disrupts brain development. We agree that children who are still finding their place in the world don't need to be constantly comparing themselves. not only in their image and how they look, but their lifestyles, all the wonderful things that everybody else seems to be doing, and all the beautiful other girls that seem to be all around. And this poor little 13-year-old just feeling terrible about herself because she's just living a ho-hum life.
Yeah.
And so when we ask the real questions, Nikki, the answer actually is 18. And Jonathan Haidt says that as well. He says, I've heard him in a number of interviews say, if I could decide what age it should be, it's 18. But he says, I understand that pragmatically speaking, political pragmatism will probably require us to settle on 16. And that's precisely what happened in Australia. Okay. So even though we were really pushing for 18, we said this is not a place for children. Children cannot consent to this level of harm. Just like we agree that smoking harms adults and children, social media harms adults and children, but we don't ask children to consent to this type of harm. Now, when they're 18 in Australia, that's the age of majority. That's when you are considered an adult. Yeah. And then if you wish to, with an adult mind, if you wish to invite that type of, I was going to say drama, or problems into your life, then you're an adult, and then I guess you have the choice to do that. Right. But you can't ask a 14-year-old who doesn't really know what's happening to make that decision. But look, ultimately, most of the groups in Australia who were on our side pushing for the lifting of the age pressed for 16. And even though it wasn't absolutely the gold standard, we still very much welcomed 16. But I would love to see another jurisdiction do better than Australia. Say, no, we're gonna take it all the way up to 18. Wow. And then when we're adults, have at it.
Okay, challenge accepted. We'll see. Okay, so part of this is actually verifying the ages, because right now there's no age verification besides just putting in your birthday, and kids lie. Some kids end up saying they're 100 because they don't know how to do math. How are the tech companies, if it's decided, how are they going to verify ages? I know this is a question I get all the time when I talk about this, is I don't want to give my kids personal information over to some tech company. And I know that actually Scott Galloway addressed this in the After Babel Substack, I think last week, talking about age gating, which I'll link to in the episode notes. It's a really interesting article. But how would you respond to how like the verifying of ages is going to go down?
Okay, so in Australia, we've given ourselves 12 months to implement this law. So even though it's passed, it hasn't taken effect immediately. So, and one of the reasons we have got a 12-month lead time is because we're still investigating the best method of age gating, so that we don't impinge on privacy. And now already in the law, it says that whatever age gating method is used and whatever data might be collected in that process has to be immediately deleted. Okay. So it's not something that the big tech companies can take and hold. And there are massive fines in our legislation. Okay. Well, let's see if they're massive. I think some of these companies are so rich that even a $50 million fine, which is what's anticipated, it may not be enough of a deterrent. So it may end up having to be more than 50 million. But the notion that they shouldn't be withholding that data is certainly already built into the legislation. Okay. And over the next 12 months, our government has given themselves some time to investigate which method is going to be the most suitable. Okay. And parents can't override it, right? Like parents can't make the decision to let them on younger. No. Now, I know that sounds like government is intruding too much into private citizens' lives because parents have no say. I believe in Florida, the law that was passed, the similar law gave parents of 14 and 15-year-olds the option to let their children. But we took, and I'm so glad we didn't follow that model because I think that if you open up that opportunity, the whole collective action problem just raises its head again. Parents start feeling pressured to having to give consent. And then once a whole bunch of students in your child's school have given consent, then there's pressure on those of us who haven't to give consent. And then we're back at square one. So I'm so glad that our legislation says it's just a blanket, no social media until the age of 16. Just like with cigarettes, just like with alcohol. In fact, those are 18-year bans.
Are they 18 in Australia?
In Australia, it's 18. I believe alcohol is 21 in the States.
Yes. Yeah.
But in Australia, everything happens at 18, which is why we were really pushing for social media. It would have made a nice little neat story.
Yep.
But our argument is this, and we've done some surveys here very recently in September. There was a survey of over 20,000 parents, Australian parents, and they overwhelmingly agreed that if they could hold their children out to 16, they would. So we're talking over 90% of parents said that they would rather their children not have social media till 16.
So take that pressure off, you know?
So take that pressure off.
Yeah.
So our argument was this is not government imposing on parents. It's actually government giving the space for parents to do what they would like to do, but simply can't because of all the pressure. So quite the opposite. It's actually, we view it as being a very pro-parent law. Because a lot of parents do have that concern that we're being told from the outside on how to parent. When in fact, it's giving you the space to parent, to instill the values in your children that you would like to instill. Because at the moment, it's TikTok values. And big tech has actually taken away your parental autonomy without even realizing it. This is giving it back to you.
It's such a gift to these kids too, and the families, all the stress that will be relieved. But imagine once this is implemented, what school will look like, what these groups of kids will look like. It'll be so much better for them. And, you know, I was wondering, what about the kids that are under 16, but already on social media? Are they like grandfathered in, or do they get kicked off and then they have to re-sign up? How does that work?
Well, I guess everybody's grandfathered because this law doesn't come into effect for 12 months.
Right. So once it comes into effect, what happens?
But once it comes into effect, if you're under the age of 16, then you're off. Well, if you're a 12-year-old today, you shouldn't be on social media anyway because of what we discussed.
Yeah.
It shouldn't be a surprise.
Right.
If you're 15 years of age today, in a year from now, you'll be 16 by the time the law comes in. So you'll get through. You'll sneak through.
Yeah.
But if you're 14 years of age and you have a social media account in Australia right now, and then yes, you've got a whole year to work to mentally prepare for when you're 15. But you know, the good thing is this, Nikki, it's not only you that's going to come off Instagram and Snapchat. It's everybody. I mean, if this happens the way it ought to happen, it really, the pain should be lessened by knowing that it's your entire class, your whole friendship group is also coming off. So you're not missing out, right? When everybody misses out, nobody misses out. So, you know, 12 months, plenty of time to get their heads around it, I reckon. I've got a feeling they'll be okay, Nikki. I've got a feeling they're going to survive this whole period. Yeah.
I think so too. It's just interesting to think that tech companies will have to sort of geolocate all of the devices, and then one day just sort of everyone has to log out and log back in, or kick them out and they have to log back in and do the age verification in order to get back on.
So the legislation says it's the onus is on the social media companies to ensure that any account that is set up with their platforms is an account for a person over the age of 16.
Okay. Yeah.
So now
they got to figure it out.
They're going to have to figure it out. And I tell you what, they'll be able to figure it out. I have absolutely no doubt, you know, for all the confusion they're trying to instill in everybody right now. What's the bet that when the fines kick in, they'll figure it out?
Yeah. They have the smartest tech people in the world working at their firm. They already know how to do this. It's not.
Well, TikTok only very recently announced, you know, with very proudly that they had removed millions of underage user accounts. So they admitted that it can be done. Yeah. And a million of those were in Australia alone. So,
wow.
So we've got a sense that it can be done.
Yeah. Okay. This is great news. How do you think this will look after the fact? What do you think those changes are going to look like? How are those kids going to be freed up? Like, what do you think the world will look like for you guys?
Well, we don't have to guess. It's going to look like 2010 all over again.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. I mean, we've only done it that way for millennia. So whatever childhood used to look like pre-2010 is what it's going to look like in 2025 in Australia, which is children being forced to connect. Now, children want to connect with their peers, and that's a beautiful thing, and it's a wonderful thing, and nobody's suggesting that they shouldn't. But they will be forced to do it in the real world now.
Yeah. Yeah.
Not in the virtual space.
So I should have asked this previously, but what constitutes like a social media platform? So is this going to apply to the AI chatbot apps that have been in the news lately? Like, what does this apply to specifically?
So this is a really good question, and it's one area that our organization, Heads Up Alliance, is not particularly happy about, that we want to continue advocating with our lawmakers, because they've already explicitly excluded messaging apps. So we think that would include Discord.
Yeah.
Certainly will include WhatsApp. They've explicitly excluded online gaming. They've explicitly excluded YouTube.
What?
Right.
No,
right.
no. It's user-generated videos. There's comments. No.
Okay. So this was precisely our reaction to it. And YouTube Shorts is really TikTok.
It's TikTok.
Right?
I know.
So that's what we've said to our lawmakers is we don't want to do this and then have our children simply migrate to YouTube Shorts.
Yeah.
And then, we're back at square one.
Okay.
So we are going to be really, really strongly advocating over the next few months that this law needs tightening, because we need to get it right. Because if we don't get it right, then everybody in the rest of the world is going to look at us and say, it can't be done. When in fact it can, but we just need to get it done right. And so there are some loopholes that we're seeing in the legislation at the moment. The good thing is we've got 12 months to get it right. So our work is not done. We got the headline. And the headline was social media ban for under 16. But, the devil is always in the detail.
Right.
And there is a little devil to deal with still that we will be dealing with over the coming months. But so we have concerns about, and we even think online gaming should be part of this law. Not because we want to ban gaming altogether, but what it would do is it would give all these platforms a strong incentive over the next 12 months to provide a better offering for our children. And so, there are things that they can do even in the online gaming world that they just don't do because there's no reason for them to do it at the moment. But if we said to them in 12 months time, we're going to reassess your platform. And if we deem it to be social media because of all the chatting and whatever that goes on, and there are no protections for children, well, you're on the chopping block. And so we were a little bit disappointed that some of these platforms were expressly excluded from the get-go. We think everything should be on the table, give them 12 months to sort themselves out, and we can reassess this time next year. So that's what we'll be pushing over the next few months.
Okay. Maybe remind them that Roblox is a pedophile hellscape for children per Hindenburg research.
Yep, that's precisely what we said, Nikki. That's precisely the where we took them.
And all the articles, but with the AI chatbots and the grooming and sexually exploiting children on there, I mean, those are so brand new that
it's an emerging problem.
Yeah, it's an emerging problem. Might be another bill. But what I have learned is that there's no perfect bill when it comes to these things. And by the time you get it right, it's never perfect. And so if it's better than the status quo, then we're happy and we just continue to iterate. And that's what we're trying to do over here with some bills. But this has all been so interesting. But do you think that we can get this done in the US? What's your opinion? I mean, I know it was such a lift there in Australia, and these companies aren't even based in Australia. They're based here. So it's tough.
Yeah, that's a really difficult question for me. I'm not overly familiar with your political landscape and why things are so tough. I've heard Jonathan Haidt say that it's very hard for lawmakers in America to agree on anything, although it does seem that there is some will to do something for our children. If there's anything we should be able to agree on, it's our children's well-being.
Yep.
And that's certainly what happened in Australia. I mean, there's a political divide here as well, but for the most part, both sides of politics were able to come together on this very strongly. So it's very difficult to point to just one side of politics and say they were the champions of this law, because everybody at every level of government, from whichever side of politics they came from, recognized that this is a problem for our children. Yeah. And yes, there are some issues, privacy concerns and things like that we need to deal with, but it can be done. And free speech issues and things like that. There is a middle ground that can be walked here to preserve all the things we want to preserve, but at the same time, spare another generation of children from this anguish and angst, because maintaining the status quo simply is not an option. So I don't know if you're going to be able to do it over in America. I'm hopeful that you will. I'm hopeful that what we've been able to achieve so far in Australia is some inspiration to America and other parts of the world.
It is.
Because, 12 months ago, Nikki, we all thought, well, I guess this is it. We're just going to have to give up our children to big tech. generation after generation, and there's no coming back from it. And we simply said, we refuse to say that that is going to be the way in Australia. And we always knew that if we could just provide one example to the world, then hopefully everybody else can also say, hey, this is possible. And I'm really looking forward to seeing what happens in America and in other jurisdictions.
Yeah. And this just seems like the obvious solution, because we've given big tech so much time to be able to prove to us that they can make their platforms safe for children, and they continue to make it more unsafe. And then we try to pass legislation to force them to be safe, and they fight against it. And it's impossible to get anything passed. Even though bipartisan, like everyone's in favor of it, they still win over the right people. And so if you're not going to make your platform safe for children, then we're not going to let our children on there at all. It's the only solution that makes sense. And
there's no halfway solution.
No. So thank you. Like, we're so grateful to you for laying this out. And it's been huge news all over the place. Even people that aren't in this world are telling me about it. And I'm like, I know, I'm so excited. And they ask me, do you think we can do that here? And I'm like, I hope. I'm going to work on it. So is there anything else that you want to share with parents while I have you? And then can you let us know where we can connect with you as well?
Sure. The only message I would like to share with parents is that while you're waiting for these laws to happen, and they may or may not, I think they will eventually. It's just a matter of time. And I think big tech knows it. They're going to give us a fight and give us a bit of a headache in the meantime. Yeah. But eventually, parents' love is too great to simply allow our children to be lost in this way. We saw it happen. They caught us off guard in the last 10, 15 years, but we're not going to let it happen again. And we're going to stand up, and parents are starting to stand up all across the world. Yeah. And so I would encourage any parent who's listening to keep standing up and to know that they can say no, to reach out to other families in their communities and just say no together. And as I mentioned a little earlier, it's actually a little no for a much bigger yes. And so I would encourage them to rediscover, what childhood ought to be about, and create a foundation for their children's long-term well-being. Yeah.
Beautiful. And where can listeners connect with you at Heads Up Alliance?
We have a Linktree page, which has a lot of very important links, and kind of will give you a good sense of what we've been doing the last few years. Okay. And our main social media platform is Facebook, and I understand the irony in all of that.
Me too.
But
I'm with you.
It's us using social media to fight social media, and it's for adults. We're not encouraging children to jump on. Yeah. And we're not encouraging even adults to be there on it constantly, but it's just there for you to find out what we're doing and join in some of our campaigns. Yeah. And so it's facebook.com/The Heads Up Alliance.
Okay. Thank you so much, Dany, for this conversation. This was wonderful. I'm going to include those links in the episode notes, and I want to stay in touch with you as things roll out on this law. And we're just really grateful for you setting the standard. Thank you.
I'm grateful for this conversation. Thank you very much for all the work you do in this space as well. It's been quite inspiring for us in Australia.
Oh, good. You're welcome.